When you know where to hunt a buck and when to hunt him, you can be a step ahead of him waiting on him to show up rather than a step behind him. Well, I got his picture here last week. I'm going to hunt here. Well, you're a step behind. You need to be waiting on him when he shows up.
Coming at you from the Exodus headquarters in Ohio, let's jump right into today's episode.
All right, we are live at the Iowa Deer Classic. We've graduated from the Starbucks lobby, and we have a conference room now. So we have Don Higgins here with us. He snuck away from the booth and seminars, and he's here, and we're going to talk everything about whitetails, trail cameras, and we're pretty excited. How you doing?
Good. How you guys?
Good.
Awesome. Thanks for having me again.
Yeah.
Glad to have you.
Anytime.
Back.
Yeah.
Is he the first
First video repeat for sure.
Nice.
So, and if you guys don't know Don, he's the owner of Real World Wildlife Products, published books, magazine articles. If you scan the web enough, you're gonna
killer of giant whitetails.
Yeah. You'll run across his stuff. So, we'll just jump right into it because we don't want to beat around the bush. We want to talk about your trail camera strategies, and one thing that we kind of admire is your ability to organize all your photos better than probably 99.9% of people, because unless it's a 150-inch deer, whatever deer they're looking for, they press delete. So walk us through your thought process and how you organize them.
Well, I organize them by location, and that's where it all starts. And I try to save at least some pictures of the younger bucks, every buck that I get, because you never know which one is going to blow up and really be huge when they're young. So I try to save some pictures of every buck I get on a property, just for a database. And then a lot of times, like the buck I shot in 2017 Trump, he was not a buck that even caught my attention until he was 6 years old. And so I really wasn't paying attention to him at all, but then all of a sudden, boom, here a giant shows up on camera, and I'm thinking, who is this? This is a new buck that moved into the area. But then I go back through that database and I see, well, this was him the year before. It wasn't as big, of course, but the shape of the rack and, brow tines give him away a lot. But by backtracking, that's how I figured out how old he was, because I had all that history saved from that location. And, if you're not going to save them, I think the biggest mistake a lot of deer hunters make with their trail cameras is they're putting them out and they're trying to pick up on a buck's pattern that they can take advantage of tomorrow or next week. And I'm setting my cameras out this season because the pictures I get this season are not going to help me kill a buck until next year or the year before next or 3 years down the road. So it's that history that really trail cameras have really made killing big bucks easy. Once you figure out the finer points of utilizing that technology. And it's not instant. And I think that's the big thing that a lot of deer hunters miss on, is they want to put that trail camera out and boom, there's a picture of a big buck. So boom, that's where I go put my tree stand out and boom, I kill him. It doesn't happen like that. It takes years of building up that history to make it happen. Yeah,
and another specific example, it was in one of North American Whitetail articles, either the summer or fall, that I alluded to before we started recording. And that was an instance where it took multiple years for you to acquire the data. And I'll let you kind of tell the story from there, because I don't want to say anything wrong.
Well, ironically, I just talked about this in a seminar about an hour and a half ago. So I had the trail cameras pictures to show for it and everything. So it won't be hard for me to relive that story. But, the buck caught my eye as a yearling because he had 6 points on one side. Actually, had 6 on both sides. So when you start seeing a yearling with that many points on one side, he's going to catch your attention. And, so I saved several photos that year. And the next year he's back, and he's got even more. He's got 7 points on each side, forked G2s, which made him really identifiable. And so I just kept watching that buck, and he had a different summer range than he did fall-winter range. So I knew where to get his picture in the summer, then I knew where to get his picture in the fall. And, the buck, by the time he was 4 years old, he was in the 170s, and he never got much bigger. The year I shot him as a 6-year-old, he just barely nudged 180. But I guess the whole, the main part of the story is that I use those trail camera photos to put his pattern together. Now, in that buck's entire home range, I only had one property that I could hunt. And that property was a small property. There was a home and a barn. A couple lived in it, and, they don't spend a lot of time outside apparently. And there's a small draw behind their barn that shoots out into open corn and soybean fields, between a quarter and a half a mile long. It never gets much wider than about 50 yards. But as the hunting pressure picks up on the properties surrounding that draw, there's always a group of does that like to bed in that draw, and on a real regular basis. I always have a trail camera in that draw, and that's where I got the very first pictures of the buck you're talking about. But the real pattern that I picked up on was that buck didn't stay in that draw. He would start showing up there about November 6th every year, and his last visit was always around November 20th. So there was like a 2-week window in the middle of November when that buck was in and out of that draw on a fairly regular basis looking for does, I'm sure. So, I had stands ready to kill that buck 2 years before I ever hunted for him. And I had one on each side of that draw for different wind directions. And when he finally hit 6 years old, and I didn't think he was going to get much bigger, I put him on the hit list, and that fall went after him. But I knew that, the plan was easy because I had the trail camera history from all those years. I literally watched that buck for 6 years in the summer in velvet, and this was his 6th fall. And I knew I had to hunt that draw between November 6th and the 20th. And my plan was every day that the wind allowed between those dates, I was going to hunt one of them 2 stands. November 6th, the wind was wrong. It was blowing right up and down the draw, so there's no way I could hunt either stand. November 7th, the wind was wrong. Finally, in the morning of November 8th, got a northeast wind, which was perfect for one of the stands. I slipped in and I killed that buck the very first morning I ever hunted for him, even though I'd watched him for 6 years. It sounds like there's a bit of luck involved, and there always is to some degree, but that trail camera history allowed me to know when and where to be. And the big thing is when. Another quirk I've noticed among mature bucks is that they will show up in the same place every year at the same time as far as date-wise. And trail cameras have shown me that. I actually wrote an article, first detail on that in 2003, titled Same Time, Same Place, that appeared in North American Whitetail. And at that time, that was the first I'd ever heard of anybody talk about it. Now, it's pretty common knowledge today, but to that point, I'd never heard anybody talk about it. And it's just, as the years have gone by since that article came out, I just reinforce my belief in that idea that those bucks are going to show up at the same time, at the same place, year after year after year. And so I use trail cameras more to pick up on annual patterns of a buck rather than day-to-day patterns. I think that's a big mistake deer hunters make, is they're trying to pick up on a day-to-day pattern. Well, this buck shows up at this food plot every day at 4 o'clock. Well, it just doesn't happen like that. But those annual patterns, when you know where to hunt a buck and when to hunt him, you can be a step ahead of him waiting on him to show up rather than a step behind him. Well, I got his picture here last week, I'm going to hunt here. Well, you're a step behind. You need to be waiting on him when he shows up, and that's what trail cameras have allowed me to do and really push my success to the next level.
That's something we've talked about annual patterns year over year a lot, like since we've started this podcast, and really since we started running the number of cameras that we've ran over the last 4 years. I think it's hard for people to buy into that idea and use cameras in that manner when they're only running maybe 1 or 2 or 3 cameras, because they're trying to capitalize, as you said, like in the moment, trying to fill their tag for that season. So we're firm believers in the annual patterns. When you're categorizing or creating those data logs, how much? Are you only looking at the dates that those deer are showing up? Are you looking at when these deer are showing up in daylight, maybe on the cusp of shooting light? Are you paying attention to the weather? Is it all a combination of all of that, or is it just this deer showing up between the 4th and the 20th on this property? And
well, I'm really looking more at the date than anything, but then once I know the date that I expect a buck to be at a certain place, then when it comes time to hunt, then I'm looking at the weather pattern, because we all know that the weather fronts are going to cause the deer to move more than they typically do. So, the past history tells me the time frame when I need to be there. And then when that time rolls around, I've already got my stands in place. They're already ready, and I'm just waiting on that, in some instances, that weather pattern to get him on his feet. And, my stands are already set. I use that along with the trail camera history to put me a step ahead of him.
Mm-hmm. Got it. Well, what about walk us through, as you said, you have your stands preset, so you're not necessarily going in mobile, but you are having success first time in, harvesting that specific target deer. When are you going in and making those setups? Is it postseason? Is it in the summer? Is it walk us through that process?
Yeah, as soon as season's over. One thing that I've done for a long time is, even before cell phones, I would take a little notepad of paper and a pen, and I would put it in a Ziploc bag, and it would be in my hunting coat. And I would sit in my tree stands, and I would take notes on what I need to do to fine-tune this stand location. I'm always trying to take a good stand location and make it a great stand location. So maybe my tree stand's got a squeak that I need to fix in the off season, or maybe I need to trim an extra shooting lane that I didn't notice before, or maybe there's a trail that's just out of range. I need to drop a tree to block that trail to push the deer a little closer to me. So I'm making notes on every stand location. And, I may sit in a stand and I notice that, hey, 200 yards over across the field, I need to get a stand over there because I'm seeing a lot of deer movement and a mature buck may be passing through. So I want to take advantage of that. So I've got this notebook full of notes, and I use a separate page for each stand location. So then in the off season, as soon as season's over, I'm going out to each of those locations. I'm ripping that notepad out, or that page out for that particular stand, sticking it in my pocket. I look at what I need to take. Do I need to take a chainsaw? Do I need to take wrenches for the stand, or whatever I need to take? And I load up all my gear on my ATV or whatever, and I drive to that stand location, and I get that stand fine-tuned to make it the best it can possibly be. But I do all that starting at the day season ends. Deer hunting never ends for me. There is no season. It's 365 days a year, and just because I'm not always carrying my bow doesn't mean I'm not deer hunting.
Right.
So as soon as season ends, and I want to do it before things green up, because from the time the woods greens up in the spring, I want to totally stay out of the woods until the day I come back to hunt. So I want my stands ready before that green up happens.
So there's a couple common things there, with all the people that we've talked to over the past, 9 months. One common thing with all the successful guys that we've talked to is being super, super meticulous and paying attention to all those minute, very fine details and doing things with purpose, as taking notes on specific stand locations, knowing what tools you need to go out to, make that stand location better, whether it's maintenance on the stand or moving or whatever.
Are you still using a pen and pad, or are you using the phone now?
I was just thinking to myself as you guys were talking that I actually do that on my iPhone now. And I almost pulled my phone out to show you that. I forgot this is just a audio and not a video, but
we'll have to get B-roll of that afterwards.
Okay,
and use that.
But yeah, I do it on my iPhone now. But I'll make a list of what I need to do at this stand location, and then I'll skip down a little bit and I'll make my list. And then as I go to the stand location, I can just look at my phone and make sure I've done everything and check them out and delete them. By the time deer season ends, my notes on my iPhone are so long, it takes me forever to scroll down to the bottom because I've made so many notes of what I need to do in the off season.
That's funny. Well, the other common thing I was going to touch on is we just talked to Cody DeQuisto, and one of his big things that he does is he's not in there pressuring his properties in the off season. As much as everyone wants to be involved and live this 365 days a year, it was very pertinent. One of the very pertinent things that he does is stay out of locations where he knows there's a big deer and he wants to may potentially go after a big deer, and not put pressure on those properties. He just stays out, leaves them alone.
Absolutely. I don't think most deer hunters realize the effect that just a little bit of human intrusion can have on a mature buck. So, I do the same thing. When I go into a hunting area, it's with a purpose.
Right.
I go in and, I don't make 10 trips, and that's why I take notes. I don't want to make 10 trips in to get a stand right. I want to take everything with me, get it done, get out, stay out. The next day I come back is the day I'm hunting that stand.
Mm. I see some things I need to work on as we have this conversation.
I'm sure there's more than one way to be successful, no doubt about it.
Yeah.
This is just my way. So
No, I think just attention to detail is kind of the overlying theme across the board with, people who find success consistently. But aside from having everything preset, are you still trying to locate deer throughout the season? Let's say you haven't found a deer there isn't a deer that fits the description that you want to try to hunt. Walk us through the process of maybe try to find one of those deer, and your process of, do you try to hunt that deer the same year, or?
Yeah, I never stop looking for the next big buck. Most of the time I find them before they're mature, and I watch them grow up, and I develop that history. It's pretty rare for me to find a mature buck and start hunting. Now, if I did, there's no doubt about it. If I found a buck that was big enough to be a shooter, I'd instantly start hunting for him. But that doesn't happen too much. Before last hunting season, I counted up, I had permission for 18 different properties. One I own, 3 I lease, and the rest I just have permission for. And on those 18 properties, I had out about 50 trail cameras. And I'm using that knowledge. There's a lot of those properties I never hunted whatsoever. In fact, less than half of those 18 properties did I step foot on with my bow to hunt. But every single one of those had at least one trail camera on them, and most of them had multiple trail cameras. So I'm using those trail cameras to basically to scout while I'm hunting elsewhere. It starts about the 1st of July when the bucks are in velvet and they've grown out enough. I'm always looking for new places to put trail cameras. And sometimes I'll have properties where I'm allowed to put trail cameras, but I'm not allowed to hunt. But if it's close to a place that I can hunt, I can still maybe get some intel. That buck that shows up on my place in the fall, but he's not there in the summer, I have no idea where he summers, but maybe I can figure that out. Not that it's really going to help me, but it helps me learn about different bucks and the tendencies they have.
That's pretty smart. As far as, I think, especially in Illinois where everything's chopped up and there isn't necessarily big tracks, and if you can find out what's going on a quarter mile away or 3/4 of a mile away, I can give you some tips.
Yeah, I mean, the buck I'm hunting right now, he disappears every year about the time he sheds velvet, and where I get a lot of his summer pictures, even I'm not allowed to hunt. I'm allowed to put cameras there, but the landowner's grandson hunts there, so he'll let me come in and run cameras. He just don't want me hunting because of the grandson, which is fine. It's in the neighborhood. It maybe will help me put the pieces together. There's one really interesting thing that I wrote about at North American Whitetail. I think it was in 2015. That not many people caught it when I said it. It didn't catch on like, the same. I did the article same time, same place back in 2003, and that quirk in a deer's habits seemed to catch on. So now a lot of people talk about catching a buck in the same place at the same time every year. But the other thing I noticed that I wrote about in 2015, that the title of the article was Homecoming Bucks. And what I noticed is that these bucks that shift their range in the fall, they have a definite summer range, and then they have a different fall-winter range. And what I noticed is that these bucks that shift their range at the very beginning of the rut, they will a lot of times make a journey back to where they summered. Or at the very tail end of the rut, they'll make a journey back to where they summered. And my theory is that these bucks relocate early in the fall. They've got their home range. They stay there. As the rut starts to heat up, they can't find a hot doe at home, and they're really anxious to get that first hot doe. So they get so anxious they run back home to where they spent the summer, and they look for it there. I mean, I've got example after example, and I was showing some of those in my seminar that I did here earlier today, that these bucks, it's around, say, November 5th to about the 7th or so, right before them does are coming in heat. I see these bucks, these mature bucks that have relocated, run back to where they spent their summer. And then right at the last 3 or 4 days of November, the first 2 or 3 days of December, they'll do the same thing. Sometimes the same buck will do both. A lot of times I don't catch them both doing it early and late, and I think a lot of it is just tied to whether they can find a hot doe at home or not. If they can, they stay there, but if not, they run back to where they spent their summer.
Do you run a lot of cameras? Or let me ask you this. In late October, over scrapes, is there any tendencies or anything that you see as far as daylight activity on certain days, or that first cold front towards the end of October? Is there any data points that you've seen over the years in that time frame?
Well, what I've noticed more than anything is we try to be too, specific as deer hunters, trying to simplify things. And sometimes in the process, we end up complicating things and make it a lot harder than it really is, or a lot more complicated than it really is. And I've said for years that weather trumps all. Weather trumps the moon. Weather trumps everything. So, I hear a lot of guys talking about how great Halloween week is, how great the last week of October is. And I've never, ever seen that unless that last week there's a cold front comes through. If it's normal, I don't see that kind of activity these guys talk about. Or if it's above normal, I certainly don't see it. But even when the conditions are normal for the last week of October, I don't see the activity that some guys claim they do. And I think that what happens is they'll see, we'll get a cold front come through, and they'll see some good activity, and they'll just assume it's like that every year.
Yeah.
And it's not if that cold front doesn't happen at that time.
Well, and that's something that I've seen. This year we had a good cold front come towards the end of October. Many other years we did not have that, like you're mentioning, and I could see where, we talk about people getting romantic, people everyone carves out like their own secret sauce of, this is what works, and I think that's could be a big part of it. Another thing that we want to talk about, and I don't know if I read it or saw it, one of your goals is to kill, correct me if I'm wrong, a Boone and Crockett buck on public land.
Yep.
Walk us through how that process has been. You don't have to give away any details, but walk us through on your process of trying to find, obviously, a Boone and Crockett buck.
Well, to be honest, I've struggled with it, and I think a big part of it is because those two giant bucks I shot in 2017 were absolutely life-changing for me, and I didn't realize it at the time. But when my truck shows up someplace, other trucks show up someplace.
Yeah.
And I never had that issue too much in the past. So, if I go on public ground and somebody runs into me in the woods, it's over.
Yeah.
And it's been pretty difficult. That doesn't mean I'm giving up on my goal. Before I'm done, I'm going to kill a booner on public. I got some things up my sleeve I'm not going to share because I don't know who's going to hear this, and especially local people, But it's been, I think it's tough for anyone. I mean, it is absolutely. My hat's off to anybody that does it. It's when you got a little bit of recognition, you're trying to do it in your own backyard, then it becomes even harder. And I didn't realize that when I made that statement. But I'm going to get it done. I'll tell you all about it once it's done.
Yeah, because, I have no clue what the public is even down by your way, but I assume there probably isn't a bunch. And I could be completely wrong. I haven't looked either, but
there's not a lot, but there's some. I mean, it could be done, but the public land that's around me is not that great either. I mean, there's some nice bucks there, but there's a lot of acres between nice bucks. So, I've got a plan, but it's gonna.
We'll wait for the plan to play out and see the success, and then we'll have you back on for a third time to share that story. I'm
usually pretty open, but I'm telling you what, I've had to deal with some things in the past year and a half that I never had to deal with before. And I'm going to be a lot more careful in the future about what I throw out. I'll make it happen, then I'll tell about it afterwards.
Well, to that point, I mean, the public that we've hunted from 2014 to 2000 up until last year, I guess 2017, just the 3 or 4 years, just sharing it inside of our kind of close inner circle without publicly saying where it is. We've seen an influx of people come in and
even at trade shows, people come up and like, "Oh, you hunt the blah blah forest."
Yeah,
it's like, wait, how?
Like how? So yeah, I mean, I can imagine if I had a truck wrapped with Exodus and we were parked along the side of the road, I imagine what, especially if I ever killed 200-inch deer in the same year, knowing that's all that you chase is giant deer.
It changes things for sure. So.
No, we look forward to seeing the progression of that, or maybe once it happens, we'll be excited to ask you about that. Something I want to clarify, possibly on the rut data, and you're saying deer show up, the same time. Is that, what have you seen, like down to the actual date, plus or minus a day or two, or is that a plus or minus 5 on each side, or?
It's really close. It's probably within 48 hours.
Okay.
And to even add a little bit more to that, for as you know, Jake, for about 20 years I raised captive deer.
Yep.
And there was specific does that would come into heat on the same date every year. You could mark it on your calendar. And I'm sure that it has something to do with the daylight hours, the pineal gland in their eyes and such, that differs a little bit from one individual animal to another. And so, I mean, if a doe can come into heat on the same day year after year after year, I don't think it's a far-fetched to think that a buck knows that he may not have a calendar hanging on his wall, but he knows the day it's time to pick up and move to the fall winter range and other things, start hitting the scrape lines or whatever. So it's tied really close to a date. It's within 48 hours and probably closer than that.
I see. And another thing I want to clarify on is, you mentioned not going in, trying to put the least amount of pressure on those properties as possible. When you're running trail cameras, are you letting those soak? When you go out and change your stands or fix your stands in March or April, you hang your camera, put lithium batteries in them, and I guess walk me through kind of your strategy of hanging the cameras in X date or.
Well, I started around the 1st of July. Holidays are big for me as far as a deer hunter, because the 4th of July weekend, there's that holiday. I'm out in the woods putting my cameras out, and it's basically in that summer I'm on food sources. In Illinois, we're not allowed to have any bait or anything, so I'm looking like at soybean fields, alfalfa fields, something like that, along the edges, because deer are edge creatures, corners where they like to come out. But the whole summer trail camera program is centered around food sources. And then around Labor Day weekend and 1st of September, I'm moving trail cameras. Almost every trail camera I've got gets moved from summer feeding sources to fall rutting locations. And I'll use the rope scrapes, where the rope hangs from the tree. I've got a lot of those that are already in place, so I'll shift my cameras to those. Funnels within, maybe it's an open gate or a fence crossing that deer utilize a lot. Around a bedding thicket or something like that, and during the rut the bucks are running in and out of there, but I'm shifting them around Labor Day to do that. Then I make a card pull around the 1st of October when our season opens in Illinois. I want to see what's happened in that month that those cameras have been out, because if I don't want to miss an opportunity. If there is a mature buck that I want to target, I want to know about it when season opens. So that last few days of September, I'm running all those 50 cameras just to get a good sense of what's there. And then I'll wait about another month, and around the 1st of November, right before the rut heats up, I'm running and checking all those cameras and getting another sense. And at that point, unless there is something there that I'm planning on shooting, or it's a really good spot where there's an opportunity for maybe a strange buck to show up, I'm probably not going to check that camera again until the end of season, after season's over, and sometimes not till spring. I mean, I've got cameras out right now that I have not been to since October that I need to go and collect them and bring them in. So, there's, 4 or 5 months of pictures that I have no idea what happened or what went by those cameras. But about every 30 days is probably average of how often I'm going to check them, but a lot of times that stretches a whole lot farther into 3 or 4 months.
Yeah, interesting. So even like with those mock scrape locations or scraping rut locations, those are still on the perimeters of your properties away from stand locations? Just to kind of clarify that just a little bit. Those camera locations aren't necessarily in locations in close proximity to your stands, or am I taking that wrong?
A lot of times they're not. I try to keep my cameras away from my stands, and I don't have them in the bedding cover and in the thickets and things like that. I want the deer to have that undisturbed. A lot of the bigger buck pictures I get are at night because I'm getting those deer out on field edges and such, which is fine. I mean, I'm not looking to create a new poster, life-size poster. I don't need high-resolution daytime pictures.
Yeah.
I just need to know the buck's there.
Right.
And that's what I'm trying to put together. So
how much I know you're relying, I mean, the majority of your strategy relies on annual data from trail cameras, but how much does, like, in-season, is there any in-season scouting that's playing a part of that, or?
I cannot attribute a single buck to trail camera data that I got that season. I think that's probably what sets me apart from most trail camera users, is that I'm putting data together down the road, and they're trying to gather data that they can use tomorrow or next week.
But what about, like, boots on the ground, like scouting, seeing rubs, or cutting a track on a field edge? I mean, is there any of that more traditional, I guess, type scouting without cameras?
Yeah. But not to the degree that I used to do it. Trail cameras have become such a big part of my scouting ritual, if you will, that they've taken the place of a lot of bootleg. They've also taken the place of time in a stand. Back before trail cameras, I spent a lot of time in observation stands, a lot of time walking, looking for big rubs and tracks and such, and now I let the trail camera do that for me, and it puts a whole lot less pressure on my area than me stomping through looking for the physical sign.
Can I selfishly run a scenario past you?
Sure.
All right, so Illinois, very small parcel, and it actually would have been fun to pull up the map. But anyways, there's a giant 8-pointer that is in the area in daylight, 2 days out of the year, and it's October 22nd, October 23rd. The last 2 years he's been in there. I'll get one velvet picture of him, and mind you, this is a small parcel, so I can't really move around a bunch, but he's been in daylight the 22nd and 23rd, 2 years in a row now. Gone. I'm not saying he wasn't in the area, but no more pictures throughout the rut, the brunt of the rut, none in December, and then I got one video of him walking at 4 o'clock in the morning, January 6th or so. So do you think I make a play on October 22nd, 23rd?
Absolutely.
2 years? Okay.
Yep. Absolutely.
I think you already knew the answer to that, but you just wanted Don to confirm.
Absolutely. So when I kill him, I'm going to give you some
I hope you get him.
No, I know as far as rut data, I think most people probably think November, that first 2 weeks in November. At least that's what I was thinking when you're referring to that. But obviously, I'm just spitballing, but possibly he's in there the 22nd, 23rd, looking for one of those first does maybe? Or is it a competition from other bucks? Because there are a lot of bucks in this small parcel.
Well, I would think he's probably, if he's a mature buck, he's probably not looking too hard for hot does on October 22nd. I know what I would do if I was you. I would get in there right now. Is your stands already ready or ready to go?
Yeah, so I went in. We talk a whole story about it. But anyways, yeah, I had my tree's already ready. I actually just took down my stand though, but it's already trimmed. It took me one time to go in and trim it. And I hunted it, and then I was hunting pretty mobile, and then I went on a piece of public, and he worked that scrape when I was 15 miles away.
Well, I would be in there right now putting that stand back up for one thing.
and have it ready.
Yeah.
And stay out of there till the 22nd, 23rd for the most part. Try to put as least amount of pressure.
Well, I would also probably put a rope scrape in front of that stand just to kind of enhance your odds. Get that ready now because that you can't go in, and I've made that mistake. That fresh rope and everything, it's just not going to work. This is the time of year to get it hung in the tree and in place, and then slip in there about mid-September and sent that rope up. I'd probably try to do it right before rain. You might think that rain's going to wash the scent off that rope, but it'll still be enough there, or there should be. Hopefully it'll wash some of your ground scent away, but then I would just stay away. I'd probably even, if you got a good cell camera, I'd probably hang a cell cam in there. If he shows up on the 20th, well, then don't wait till the 22nd. Get in there and get after him. So, I have no idea how the property lays out or anything, but I would probably try to get 2 or 3 stands in there so that when the 22nd rolls around, you're not dependent on one wind direction. You've got numerous options so you can hunt. And that'd be my approach.
That's good advice.
If it don't work, don't blame me.
Well, I've tried one. I don't know. It's one of those weird things where his shed antler was found a mile north of where I'm hunting this parcel, and I think rumors finally getting out that there's. I mean, it's a pretty big deer. So he's lived to January and. Hopefully October 22nd, 23rd, we can put an end to the story. I appreciate it.
Yeah,
but,
good luck.
Wanted to ask that while we're here. Anything else that you can think of here?
The rain comment kind of sparked my interest. It's something we kind of talked about going in before a big heavy rain or storm event to go in and check cards on cameras to make sure it washes your scent away. Is that something that you? I mean, that makes obvious sense to us.
Absolutely, yeah. If I know there's a big rain event coming, and I kind of mention those dates when I'm moving cameras and when I'm checking cameras.
Right.
If I see a rain event coming, I'm out there moving and checking as many as I can right before that rain. So and I'm also trying to really focus on the ones where I think there's a target buck. Those properties where I've got cameras there, but I really don't expect to have
lower
a shooter
priority.
buck there. Yeah, they're down the priority list, and they don't get hammered or they don't get as much care because when you're running 50 cameras, you can't check every one of them right before rain.
Right.
So you got to kind of prioritize what you know already about each area.
Absolutely. Makes a lot of sense.
What size rope are you using, or what? I mean,
It's about I go to a farm and home store, and that you can usually buy it by the foot. They custom cut it to whatever you need. I get the biggest they got.
Okay.
Usually hemp rope. I think 3/4 inch is a lot of times the biggest you can get. Occasionally you can find 1 inch, but you want the biggest. And it's incredible the pictures you get on these things. I mean, I've got pictures of fawns up on their back legs kicking at the rope, and I've got pictures of raccoons swinging from the rope back and forth. You got pictures of raccoons climbing on top of each other's backs to get on top of that rope, and you get some pretty neat pictures. That rope, for whatever reason, it's like a grapevine. How bucks like to rub their face on a grapevine.
Yep.
Well, for whatever reason, they can't seem to walk by one of them ropes without rubbing on it, and works like a charm. I got to give the credit for it to Barry Wenzel. I think Barry's the one that came up with that. I don't want anybody to think it was my idea. I just took it and ran with it, so it works good.
How much of I've obviously read your books, and you've reflected on certain, I don't want to call them old timers, but key influential hunters personally to you, like throughout history, and Barry and Gene, correct?
Right.
And were dedicated chapters in one of your books about them. Do you see that in yourself, like picking key things or key, strategies or bits and pieces from some of those guys throughout history and kind of molding those into your own strategies? Is that accurate?
Yeah, it's very accurate. When I was a kid, I got out of high school and I started a job and it's crazy about the outdoors. But on this job, one of my coworkers was a guy named Alan Foster. And he's older than me, and he was doing what I dreamed about doing. He was killing big bucks consistently. And so that first summer, I spent every free moment on that job. Every break, I would just run out to find him and pick his brain about hunting big deer. And he saved me a lot of years on the learning curve. That chance meeting, I don't think it was chance at all. I think God brought us together because he had a plan for me down the line. But Al was already corresponding with guys like the Wenzels and Roger Rothar, and through Al, I got to meet those guys. And I can remember as a 19-year-old kid, 18, 19, 20-year-old kid, that I would send letters to Roger and Gene Wenzel, and they would always respond. And here I was, just some kid crazy about deer, young enough to be their son, lived 3 states away. Well, actually, the Wensels lived in Montana at the time, and I was just a kid in Central Illinois. But the thing that struck me was that those guys always took time to answer every letter that I ever sent them. And so I try to follow that too and give back. And when I see young kids that reach out to me, I try to answer every email. I know sometimes I probably fall short, but I try to answer every phone call, and especially to the youth. I want there's some things that I think the industry's lacking just a little bit, and one is stewardship, and we need to be better stewards of the resource. And I try to set an example. And sometimes, on social media especially, I get a little wound up and fired up about some topics, but at the same time, my intention is good. I want to leave the resource better than I found it in the sport. And, I'm very blessed that I'm able to make a living in this industry, and it's a blessing that I don't take lightly. So I'm trying to, leave my mark in such a way that it's positive, and that, 30 years from now, when somebody's looking back and I've shot my last deer, maybe some young kid that's 10 years old today, he can be sitting doing a podcast, and he can say, I learned this from Don Higgins. So I always try to give credit, when I've learned something from someone else. I don't claim to be a know-it-all. I don't claim to be an expert. I just try to, I'm a student of the whitetail. I'm not a whitetail expert. I'm a whitetail student, and I just try to continually learn and get better. But at the same time, I try to have a positive impact on people, because, people's what's really important. One day, all those bucks on the wall aren't going to mean a single thing to any deer hunter, and I try to be mindful of that, and, just be a good role model.
That's funny, because my 8th grade term paper, I wrote about deer hunting, and I used one of your books as a source.
Really?
Yeah.
Awesome.
So it's funny you bring that up.
Well, thank you.
Well, I think that's probably, for guys that have had the chance to communicate with you or sit down and listen to one of your seminars, it's probably a common thing that I hear among, our circle is you're one of the most well-respected people in the industry because of your humble approach, because of how honest you are, because of the intent that you have with everything that you do. So personally, I thank you for that. And I think industry-wide that we can't thank you for enough for all the things that you do, whether it's, written content, obviously podcasts like this, audio content, or the books. And
well, I appreciate the kind words. A lot of times in seminars or when I'm speaking at a church event or whatever, I tell people that, God didn't make me any better than he made anybody else in that room. And we've all got our gifts. And for some reason, he put a fire in my heart for big whitetails when I was a kid. And I had no idea at the time why, but I just chased it with all I had. But, I can sit in a room giving a seminar with 500 people, and I promise you, everybody in that room, all 500 people, they either are better at something than everybody else in that room, or they're more knowledgeable about a certain topic than everybody else in that room. So, I don't ever want to talk down to anyone. We've all got our strengths. We've all got our failures. And, I just try to be I tell them too, I'm a simple country boy, and I try to always be mindful of that and never look down at anyone. I'm living the dream. I never could have ever dreamed that I'd be doing what I'm doing today. So, I'm thankful for guys like you that give me an opportunity to get my message out. You guys are a big part of what I do, because without your platform, my message would never get out there. So thanks to you guys.
Absolutely.
Yeah, anything else before we close up? We know you're manning a booth as well, and we don't want to eat up too much of your time, as I mentioned before. But
no, I think that's it. Where give everyone listening some information where they can find your books, where they can find your personal stuff. Obviously, real world. Touch on where everyone can get a hold of.
Well, my personal website is higginsoutdoors.com. You can find information about my books, my consulting service. I've started a new class that next Saturday will be the first one of those. It's been very well received. The one's already sold out, and I'm sure the second one will be before it happens. as you mentioned, I'm the president and co-owner of Real World Wildlife Products. You can go to that website and find out more information on our products. But, I'm living the dream, and I just appreciate everybody that supported me in any way, whether it's buying my books or just reading my articles or attending a seminar. It's just, I'm just forever grateful to everybody that's had a small part in supporting me.
Absolutely. We will link to all that in the description on the podcast and on the YouTube video as well, so they can track you down. And if you have a question, maybe send it his way.
Send the emails. I'll probably answer it. I intend to answer every email. It's just sometimes I overlook one, and it might take a little bit to get a reply. But don't be afraid to resend it and
give you a nudge
and give me exactly, because sometimes that's what it takes. But I appreciate every email I get and every phone call. So I hope they never stop.
Appreciate it.
All right, thanks, guys.